Good morning, you beautiful souls. How are you? I'm excited because it's actually sunshiny here in Connecticut. Contrast this with yesterday when three different times I tried to go out for a walk. The first two, it started hailing just before I left, so I didn't go. The third time, about 7:30 in the evening or 7:15, the sun had poked through and I thought I'd have an opportunity to get out there. Got about half a mile away and felt little raindrops and thought, oh, I should probably head back. And then bam, the sky's open and I got caught in a hailstorm like you wouldn't believe on May 11th. Something is just wrong about that. But anyway, today the sun is out and I was able to sit outside and do my Whoa, just knocked my little stand over here. Sorry if I just made you a little nauseous with that movement. But it was just so delightful to sit outside this morning. I started with a jacket and actually the sun was so nice. I was able to take it off and sit tucked into a little corner of my little deck where the sun was shining and coming off the foundation or the walls, and it just felt awesome. So I am still holding out hope that we are going to have a little spring here before summer just, comes in and ramps us all up to 80 degrees. So anyway, enough of the weather report. While I was doing my meditation this morning, I literally was taken back to about 45 years ago. Yes, my age is showing. About 45 years ago when I was in college, sitting probably in a psychology class. And the professor was talking about functional dysfunction or dysfunctional function. I'm never sure which is the right way to say it. And I found myself fascinated with that idea. And I didn't quite get it at first. It took me a while, maybe 45 years to really understand it. I don't know. But it's this idea that we develop ways of thinking and acting that help us adapt as children to our environment, to our family system, to our tribe, if you will. And those early forms of adaptation or figuring out how to survive within our family of origin, within our community, within the world as it existed for us up until about 6 years of age or so, served a function then, worked for us then in that environment. But as we grow and develop and mature and want to be in the world in a different way, right? As we, get older and want to be in relationship with other people and that kind of thing, those early adaptations that were functional then may prove to be dysfunctional now. So what am I really talking about, right? So you've all heard the term, that our ego is basically our survival mechanism. So what does that really mean? That sounds, oh yeah, okay, that helped us to survive. But the truth of the matter is that it really helped us to survive, both individually and as a species, right? So the most primitive part of the brain, right, sort of the stem, the part of the brain that developed first is all about survival. Because if we didn't develop survival skills, we wouldn't have continued to grow and develop as a species, as humanity. And so it's not just a cliche. It's not just a saying, right? That when we're threatened, we go into survival mode. It's very true. The very primitive part of our brain that helped us to survive is still there. It has not gotten an upgrade. It doesn't have a new version of it. We don't have, brain 2.0 or 5.0. The same functional survival brain that humanity as a species had at our early stages of development is still that same primitive survival brain. And it is focused on keeping us alive. And it is the strongest, because it's about survival, it is the strongest part of our mind. And so it's not just a concept. It's not just an idea that if you didn't fit in, if you didn't go along with the rules of your family or your tribe or your culture, you literally would not have been able to survive. Right? Broken down, that's it. That's the bottom line. And so there is a drive in every human being that's just part of our DNA. It's part of how we are able to continue as a species, that is driven to learn the rules of our family or our tribe and then fit in, right? Because not fitting in, either even as an adult in that kind of tribal environment, if you for some reason broke the rules and you have a different tribe, if you broke the rules and were put out of the tribe, it was very unlikely that you would be able to survive very long on your own. And of course, as a child, if you break the rules of your family and you become the one who's ostracized or not cared for or made to be the black sheep, right? It's very difficult to survive within your family system. And so the brain is an amazing thing. It can help us find ways to adapt to our family system to ensure that we are kept in the tribe, that we are accepted, that we are approved of, that we are nurtured, that we're loved, basically. Because without that, there would be no ongoing life. So depending on the family system and the perhaps religious orientation and culture and socioeconomic, like so many factors. So depending on really the family that you were born into, that's where you first learn your most basic survival mechanisms. So I'm just going to share a few of these with you today and show how they may have served you at an earlier time in your life, but they may not be serving you now when you have different needs and desires. So, for example, if you were given the message that when you made others happy, when you did what others wanted you to do, you may have developed the functional dysfunction of being a people pleaser. You became highly attuned to what those around you wanted from you. And there was very little room for your own needs, your own desires to develop, because your development was so overshadowed by tuning in to what those around you needed or wanted from you. So that's sort of the example that I'm giving as the people pleaser. Another way you may have adapted is that you may have gotten the message that it was not only okay, but maybe deeply, what's the word I'm looking for? Not okay. That's a psychological term. Deeply not okay to show your emotions. I was working with someone yesterday, and we're just getting to know each other. I have not worked with her very long. And something that she said floored me. We were talking about being vulnerable and crying and her pattern of never crying in front of anyone. And she used a phrase that really kind of knocked me back. And she said, crying never got me anything. And she went on to say that when she cried as a child, none of the adults in her life noticed, responded, cared, or did anything. So she has a belief that A, it's not okay to cry, and B, even if she does, it's not going to get her anything, right? But that's such a flawed premise, that the idea of crying is used to get you something. Hey, Chrissy, because for children, they don't cry to get something unless they've learned that crying does get them something. But initially, they cry because they're hurt, or they're sad, or they're disappointed, or they're frustrated, or they're angry, right? There's a lot of emotions that can get tied up in tears, but depending on how they've been responded to, they may get a message loud and clear that your tears are unacceptable. And I think boys are probably told this more than girls. But anyway, that's just another example. One of the other ways that we may have adapted in our family of origin, or wherever we grew up with whatever caretakers we had around us, is that we may have learned early on that even as children, we were expected to take care of the adults. And maybe not physically so much, like, making their food or, whatever, making their beds or things like that, but that we became the emotional caretakers of our caregivers. And it's a little bit like the people pleaser, right? Again, highly tuned in to what other people needed. And as I say that, I know clients who at 7, 8 years old, were sent to the grocery store and told to buy the groceries, right? And then if they didn't get it right, there were consequences when they got back. So in that way, they were being meeting the adult's physical needs. Or an older sibling who is given the responsibility or just assumed to be taking care of the younger siblings. So this parentification, right, this inappropriate parentification of a child to be tuned in and expected to take care of the adults around them or the other children around them. Another way that we may have learned to adapt in our family, if it was a dysfunctional family system, or if there was sort of an intolerance of differences of opinion or different perspectives, or any kind of discourse or disagreement that made it very uncomfortable, that kind of created tension in the space. You may have learned to be the jokester, right? So whenever you feel that tension, whenever that the space, the energy, the room has that tense feeling, you may be the first one to jump in to try to relieve that tension with a joke or a story, or however that may have worked for you. And the last one that I want to talk about, and certainly these are not all the ways, but this idea of when no one in our environment is meeting our needs, and when perhaps we're even getting punished or shamed or humiliated or scapegoated for expressing our needs, our emotional needs, our physical needs, our mental or psychological needs, our need for safety and structure and reassurance in some way. one of the ways we may have countered the fact that no one in our family system was providing any of that, or in fact, we were getting negative consequences for asking those things or wanting those things, is that we just became super self-sufficient, right? That's sort of, well, I don't need anything from anybody, right? I can do this all myself. And really what that is I can't trust anybody. I have to take care of myself because nobody else is going to take care of me. So those are a few ways in which we may have developed some ways of functioning that worked for us then. And, this doesn't necessarily require that we grew up in, a neglectful or abusive family. I grew up in a very loving family that was imperfect. And so there are ways in which, and I grew up with 6 brothers. I grew up in a large family where time and attention was at a premium. Plus, my grandmother not lived with us. So there were 12 of us at some points in the house growing up. And so time and attention was at a premium. And I know that I developed some ways of being like the perfect child, the smart child, right? The good girl that served me then, that as I got older and wanted to be in relationship with people in different ways did not serve me. So what does some of that look like, right? So if you're the people pleaser, like me, the good girl, right? Good daughter, good mother, good wife, good grief, right? So what happens when we play that good girl, the people pleaser, right? The one who is so tuned in to everybody else's energy that they're always meeting everybody else's needs and always putting theirs on the back burner if they're even aware of theirs. Well, we become exhausted and we become resentful, even in our giving and even in our doing. It comes from a place of still needing acceptance and approval. And so it's not a free, open, giving that way. It's out of this sense of, oh my God, if I don't keep pleasing people or doing what they want or showing up as the good girl, I'm going to be rejected or I'm going to be neglected or I'm going to be told that I'm not okay, right? And that's intolerable. And so we continue on with this behavior. If we're someone who grew up in a situation, and many of us did. I mean, I know my parents never talked about emotions. Although I felt loved, emotions were just not a thing that ever got really talked about. So, but when we get clear messages that it's not okay to express emotions, whether it's big boys don't cry or, good girls don't get angry, whatever that is, we get disconnected from our emotions. And emotions are simply emotion, energy, E for energy, in motion. It's just chemistry that's moving through our body that helps us know that we're out of alignment with our highest good or with our highest well-being, whatever you want to call it. Emotions that make us uncomfortable or angry or sad or whatever are just information. So when we are given a message that we have to suppress our emotions or that some emotions are bad and some emotions are good, we just shut that down and we either get disconnected from our emotions or we feel shame and guilt around certain emotions. We can become depressed and anxious because there's no way to express our emotions, and that keeps our energy stuck and clogged. And it creates a sense of terrible loneliness because of the disconnection, both with ourselves and with other people. And one of the things that I think is most insidious about this is that we stop trusting ourselves, especially if we're told that it's not okay to feel that way, or you're just making that up, or you're being dramatic, or so-and-so would never have done that to you, right? We begin to question our own emotional guidance system, our own inner knowing, our own intuition, and we turn down the dial on that. And we may turn down the dial on that for the rest of our lives, right? And that's a really terrible thing. That's a really terrible thing. So moving on to the next one, the person who makes everybody laugh, right? The jokester, the one who relieves the tension in the room, the one who makes the sad parent happy, the one who jokes the rageful parent out of his or her rage, generally continues to play that role of the joker, of the one who overgives or always relieves the tension in the room with some kind of lightening the mood, right? And again, it just creates a behavior, an energy of overgiving, of overcaring, of being so dependent on someone else's reaction or someone else's behavior or thoughts that you can't possibly be yourself because you're so tuned in to everybody else's needs. And the self-sufficiency, right? The damn, I got this, I don't need help from anybody. I mean, that's pretty self-evident. When we get older and when we want to be in a different kind of relationship with other people, if we're constantly in people-pleasing mode, or if we can't share our emotions, or we're joking our way through a relationship, or we cannot accept love and support from anyone else because it makes us feel like we're weak or we're vulnerable, or, I am woman, hear me roar, like I can't take care of myself. Like there's all this shame and vulnerability and self-judgment, maybe even self-loathing about being a person who might actually need or want or desire someone's support. And it's just so hard to accept that. So, that's what I've got this morning. It just, like I said, sort of came to me as I was sitting in my meditation to share this idea about how this dysfunctional functioning or this functioning dysfunctionally that we really need to take a look at that and see where in our lives we are still operating out of some of this early programming, and where we can begin to let some of that go. Shame, absolutely. Because there's no way we can be our true, authentic, powerful, divine, loving selves if we're still operating in the old patterns of needing approval, of needing acceptance, of needing to be kept in the tribe at any cost, because to be tossed out of the tribe would actually mean death. And so just coming back to that again, it's not a cliche, right? That we're in survival mode or that the ego is afraid that it's going to die. This was a very real thing. If we got tossed out of the tribe, if we got tossed out of the family, you're dead to me, right? Whatever, I think each culture has their own version of that, but it literally meant our death in our primitive mind back in the day, right? And also when we were children. And so those survival programs are so strongly embedded in our cellular memory, in our DNA, in our individual patterning, in our personal energy signature, that I mean, this is my belief, until we can really begin to unpack those old patterns and programs, it'll be very difficult, if not, I hate to use the word impossible, but I'm going to use the word impossible, to really step into our fullness, into our radiance, into the truth of who we are when all of those stories fall away. And doing that work, the diving in, the doing the deep work, the looking at what's going on in your life now and following those patterns and those threads back to earlier experiences in your own life is really the stuff that I love to do. When I was in school, double majoring in psychology and sociology, I actually thought about being an archaeologist, but I couldn't figure out how you'd actually, I don't know, turn that into a job. I know people do, but in my 20-something-year-old mind, I couldn't figure out how that could fit into the life that I was seeing for myself. But I feel like I am an archaeologist. I feel like I take people into an archaeological study of their lives, where we turn over lovingly and caringly so as not to break things even more, but we turn over the ground to find the broken pieces and put the stories back together in a different way that can serve you now. So with that said, I'm going to send you many blessings on this beautiful Tuesday. If, as you're listening to this, you have a sense that there perhaps are some patterns that functioned for you at one time but are no longer functioning in your highest good, especially now as we move into these higher vibration energies, and are really being called to bring our highest self forward to create a new world. If you want to have a conversation about that, I'd love to have a conversation with you. So just reach out, and otherwise enjoy the rest of this beautiful day and week, and I will see you again soon. Oh, I didn't play my tingshaws at the beginning, so I will close. Namaste, my beautiful friends.